Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is MJ Jones. This session is all about training and professional development in response to the events of 2020. There are numerous topics for instructional design that can include the psychology of learning, um, graphic design, instructing those with intellectual disabilities. But today is kind of a snapshot of my experience in 2020. So the focus is going to be on current events and their impacts on workplace learning. I'll discuss some solutions I've had and some best practices for adapting in this kind of new environment. All right.
MJ, can I interrupt you just a second? You
Yes.
are sharing, but you're not in presentation mode. So it,
You can change the slideshow.
yeah, if you can hit the slideshow button, we would be able to see it a little better.
And that one is,
It should be
At
at the bottom
the,
of your screen,
at the top next to
or
enemy.
yeah,
all right. Sorry, everyone.
it's all good.
Okay.
Whoop.
Is that better or same?
Perfect.
Okay. Sorry about that. This is Technology and Training 101. And, okay. And everyone can see the next slide.
Looks good.
Okay, I'll get started. So I'm MJ Jones, as she mentioned. I work here at Chesterfield County Public Library as their trainer. We have about 10 different library locations and about 200 different staff members that I'm responsible for training for. We are located, if you're not familiar with Chesterfield, a few minutes outside of Richmond, Virginia, which is the capital of Virginia. And we're about an hour and 45 minutes, depending on the traffic on I-95 from the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. I have my master's in library and information science and a background in curriculum development as well as instructional design. So the agenda for today, I'll start with a few icebreakers to get to know my audience since we're in a virtual environment. I'll outline my learning objectives. We'll discuss some training challenges that arose particularly in 2020. I'll share some best practices, some tools for technology, some of which I had used prior to 2020, but definitely have implemented them now more than ever. An example of different training content I've delivered. We'll do a review. And last but not least, a Q&A section. So if you could hold your questions till that designated time, that would be great. All right, so let's get started with the icebreakers for today. And I know a few people have done this already. So if you haven't already done so, can you in the chat say which library you're from in the city and state? I've put up a map of Richmond, Virginia here. So to orientate you all where we are in the state. I know this is a multi-library event and it's mostly hosted by libraries in the South, but I did see a few people from Arizona, South Dakota, and other places like that. Okay, I'll give you a couple more seconds to put in your location. All right, thank you for sharing. My next icebreaker, if you could take a couple minutes to think about how you're feeling today in this session on a Tuesday. I'll show for you a vision board and it's got several different moods. So which one of these images best describes your mood for today? You can pick one or two if you'd like. This is my Oprah mood board. There's also a Baby Yoda mood board available if you use your preference. We often use this particular mood board in our new hire orientation to see how people are feeling in the session. Generally, it's either sometimes an 8 or a 9. They're excited, exuberant that they've started a new job, but 8, definitely a lot of processing of information and paperwork with the county starting with us. So how's everyone feeling today? And I'll give you a couple moments to put that in the chat. All right, we will get started with the next slide, which discusses our learning objectives. What do I hope that you get out of this session today? You'll be able to describe current challenges for instruction and professional development, explain best practices for delivering virtual training sessions, identify some tools for designing virtual learning, and also measure the effectiveness of instruction. So once we deploy the training, does it actually work? Okay, so first I'm going to start with some training challenges, disruptions to learning. A lot went on last year, as you know. The pandemic left many sick. A lot of people lost their lives. The economy took a major hit. Several people were unemployed, were furloughed, others forced to telework for um, uh, lots of time they're not used to. Organizational budgets had to be reconfigured with this whole new environment. Um, there was social justice activism at the forefront of the news. As I mentioned, that we are just outside of Richmond, Virginia, so there was a lot going on there. At one point, we even had a curfew throughout the city. The political climate was also unsettling, and a few of our libraries actually in November were polling stations as well. So there was a lot going on and to process emotionally with the events of 2020. So what do these current events have to do with training, and what are the impacts? Well, several of those current events become hot topics for training. COVID, for example, is embedded in basically all of our training going forward in terms of safety protocols, what we can or cannot do with customer service and social distancing. There's been a proliferation of equity, diversity, inclusion training. So a lot of these current events cannot be ignored, and they often become catalysts for training. Obviously, there are budget cuts, and this impacts staffing, for example, how many people are available, certifications, funding for going to different professional development activities. Scheduling looks completely different. So if you don't have 100% of staff available, maybe you have other people absorbing other duties. They have to rework their schedule if they're virtually learning with their children. Maybe their spouse has lost their job. So scheduling does not look the same. Supplies. So maybe the space for training or the training supplies may not be available. For example, we had several different training laptops available for new hires when they came in. And then once we migrated to mostly telework, those supplies were no longer available. So we kind of had to adjust with that. Our library services. So the events of 2020 altered how we deliver our library services, and in turn how we train our library staff to deliver these services, whether that be technology or customer service. Virtual learning. So here at Chesterfield, we had some training that was in person and some that were online. It was a bit of a hybrid. Now it's predominantly online. And although these people in the picture look really jovial, there's kind of a virtual fatigue that goes on with constantly Zooming, not being able to see your coworkers in person. Another thing I want to also point out is we talk about our customers um, and their digital divide sometimes and not having access. Sometimes your new hires, sometimes people that are working here don't have reliable internet access to telework or don't have the devices that are compatible. So it's not just customers, but also staff that are transitioning to this virtual learning environment. And last but not least is employee wellness. As I mentioned, this might be an issue with scheduling, with training. Staff may be sick or have family that is ill. For example, there's just a lot going on with the pandemic, politics, and protests. The environment can really take its toll on the physical and mental well-being of staff. They're juggling a lot, and in turn, they're often interacting with customers that are also juggling a lot as well. So training may not be at the forefront of their mind. Okay, so now that I've established some challenges that libraries face with training, what can we do about it? What are some best practices that we've implemented during this dynamic time? And some of these best practices I've implemented before 2020, just FYI, so they're applicable to both living in the pandemic and not. So first off is obviously planning the training out, having specific goals and objectives, and we've had to modify this lately with the last year. I actually have a training template, which I'll show you in the next slide, but really thinking about what behavior you hope to change and how you hope to measure it. Leverage vendor and organizational training. So what does this mean? There might be vendors you work with, or say, for example, at the county, trainings that are already available in your toolbox that you may just have to modify for your specific library. Our Chesterfield County is offering diversity training specifically for women and people of color. So we're hoping to implement that, at least one of those, for a training session later this year. Think about the why. Why do my users or my audience need to take this training? And be explicit about it. Maybe tie it into your strategic plan. Be agile and flexible, especially with scheduling. You might need to host a session in the morning, in the afternoon, record it, specifically if people's schedules are moving around during this time. Have some training cheerleaders. So again, training may not be on the forefront of people's minds. So have people maybe review the training, get excited for it. Also having managers discuss the training, promote it for yourselves, have that extra clout. I'm not a manager, so it's super helpful when they say, hey, let's all get on board to do this training. It will be for the benefit of everyone. So that was getting started, sort of the pre-planning phase of training. And this is the template that I use for establishing, what sort of problems do I hope to solve? How do I hope to measure the learning objectives? What behavior I hope to change? Any requirements as well as challenges. They are listed from the second from bottom. I'm sort of anticipating I may not have laptops, this person may not have access. How can I rework this? So this is the training template that I use. Okay, so next up is the delivery. First off, think about connection before content. And I took this phrase from another group of trainers, and I tried to do this beforehand with the icebreakers. We're in a virtual environment, so it's not face-to-face. We're missing sort of that energy of having the person next to us. And with training, being in a Zoom session, it might be the only social interaction an audience member has had all day with social distancing. So try to have an icebreaker, something to get to know your audience. Another one we use in new hire orientation is we ask people to go in their house and find something that best represents them, their passions, their hobbies. About 80% of the time, it's usually their pet, their dog, or their cat. But just try to create some sort of camaraderie if you can in this environment. Next up is setting the stage. So for a live session such as this one, maybe minimize distraction. I have my phone on silent. I've put on my automatic replies, do not disturb. So make sure for the live session, you've minimized distractions. Have someone facilitate the session. So I'm thankful for my two facilitators today who are manning the chat, making sure everything goes by smoothly. It would be difficult to present and answer all the questions. So thank you for doing everything you do behind the scenes. Also with facilitation, I want to mention if you can, maybe have someone talk for the first half of the session and then someone else talk for the other portion. That way it creates a different energy and it's not the monotony of someone just talking over and over again for an hour duration. Lastly, have clear, concise instructions. So again, people are taking training. They're on a limited time frame, so they need to be directed and have succinct instructions of what to do and when for training. And this applies not just to live sessions, but also an online course. How can I get in? What do I need to complete? How long is the training? Have bite-sized information with breaks. So maybe you offer a pre-work before a live session through a webinar. Maybe you break it up into different chapters. Breaks are also important for live sessions. You may not know if your audience member has like low blood sugar and needs to take a break. Some people are not as vocal about that. So have breaks and also let your audience know, hey, if you need more time outside of this designated break, just let us know. Think about the user. So access, and if you can, make it ADA compliant. I'm so excited that there's closed caption. I did make a transcript, but thinking about people, for example, who are hard of hearing, this is a difficult time for them, communicating through masks, as well as having this virtual environment. So if you can make your content ADA compliant. Make it easy to navigate, and this goes along with having clear, concise instructions. People don't need to jump through hoops to go through training. They can easily log in, complete what they need to do. Think about making...
MJ, can I interrupt just a second? We're getting a little like breathing feedback. Can you maybe adjust your microphone down just a hair? That might help.
Okay.
Let's try that.
Is that
Thanks.
better?
I think it is.
Thanks. Think about how your training can be applicable to both staff and customers. So you may create a job aid, an infographic, or a demo video, the catalog that both new hires as well as customers can use. For example, we are actually spending a little less time interacting face-to-face with customers. So any sort of instructional tools they can use will be really helpful. Is that better?
Yes, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we did the pre-work and then the delivery, and now the after instruction. So what to do after we've delivered a training. Evaluation and feedback is really important. I'll dig into this a little bit deeper into some later slides. But thinking about areas of improvement once you've completed the training. Be able to update content easily. So there are things that are changing with COVID weekly. So you want to be able to revise training on the fly, either yourself or some other staff can easily update content so that it's as accurate as possible. Find a place, if you don't already, to house training, again, to make it accessible for you, and that ties into updating content easily. And if you can, diversify your training. So maybe not have PowerPoint after PowerPoint after PowerPoint. Maybe you do a live webinar, maybe you do an infographic. So just switch it up if you can. Okay, so next chapter is going to be about instructional instruments, so tools for virtual learning that I have used. Okay. The first one, obviously, is a classic, which is Microsoft Office. I've used, obviously, PowerPoint, which I'm using now, Microsoft Word to create job aids or FAQ sheets. There's also other apps, and I encourage you to think outside the PowerPoint box, such as Microsoft Forms, which you can use for a training survey or a quiz / a knowledge check. There's also OneNote Notebook, which is great for project management. So you can create a training out of OneNote that can easily organize a lot of information in an interactive notebook. We've also here at the county been using Microsoft Teams. So for both live webinars, to record them, so that's the platform we've been using. Adobe Captivate is another product. Along with Articulate, it's kind of the premier instructional design software. Both of them do have a fee, just FYI, but there's a lot that you can do with it in terms of scenarios, in terms of different quizzes you can create, interactive modules. I will say there's a really big kind of learning curve for Adobe Captivate. So FYI, it's a little bit more time consuming, but if you learn the product, there's so much you can do. We use a learning management system here at Chesterfield County called Cornerstone. So all of our departments use this as well. So I create classes and then put them into Cornerstone software, and it's able to track who completed what at what time, and then also send some reminders to staff to complete their training. So TechSoup is a really great website if you haven't already explored it. They offer both free and paid training. What's great about TechSoup too is for products such as Adobe Suite, they offer discounts for nonprofits and libraries. So a lot of their training is geared towards people that don't have a large budget. So I recommend looking at TechSoup and all of their different trainings. They recently are actually delivering training that is bilingual. So they have different courses on like Excel that are available not only in English, but Spanish as well. Pixabay is what I use to find different images, both illustrations and photographs. You don't have to worry about copyright, and you can search for different landscapes or orientations. So I really like Pixabay for different images, and this sort of breaks up the training so that it's not all text. Next up is Canva. This is probably my favorite platform to use. It creates rich and beautiful, polished training content. I can use it for infographics, training manuals. There's so much you can do with Canva. There's a free and paid subscription, but I've mostly used the free one without any problems. So Canva is a really great resource if you have not checked it out. It's also great for marketing. So if I have any people here that are specifically working in marketing or programming, they have really great flyer templates as well. I use Loom to record quick demos for instruction, such as like navigating the online catalog, how to place a hold. Loom is limited to 5 minutes, at least in the free subscription that I use. But with Loom, that kind of makes me think about what content I absolutely can say in 5 minutes. So I like that it makes me be succinct. It also can track metrics in terms of how many people viewed my video. People can comment. They can also like different videos that I create. And then Issue I've used as well. So this is another platform, both free and paid. It creates sort of digital magazines. And like Loom, you can track metrics in terms of how many people downloaded content, how many views people have read through it. So it's good for like training newsletters and flyers. So as a disclaimer, I do want to mention if you have a tech department you are working with, do make sure if you download any software that it's vetted by them. you don't want to download any software that has any viruses or could mess up your computer. So I know a lot of people may be teleworking, so be mindful that you're not just downloading a really cool software and not having it vetted through your tech department. So has anyone used any of these products before? Um, do you have any other suggestions for others I have not mentioned? I'll give you a couple seconds. I would say Canva is probably my favorite out of all these.
Had a question in the chat whether Canva is difficult to learn.
No, it's not. I learned it and I just like that it looks very polished without me putting little graphic design effort into it because I want to focus on the instruction, the content, and I kind of just put it in there and it makes it look beautiful. So there's a lot less of a learning curve there.
We have another suggestion for TechSoup. Captivate, yes, high learning curve. Wiki Commons for photos is something someone suggested. I'm just reading through the chat here.
Okay.
Cornerstone, Captivate, Office, and Pixabay. Issue is great also. I think that's for photos. Is that ISSUU?
That's for digital magazines. So I can
Ah,
upload a training manual in there and it's really interactive. It makes the user feel like the magazine is in their hands, but it's digitally. I really like it. And you can gather statistics on how many people viewed it in the week of March versus April. So it's really great.
lovely. Someone suggests open source broadcasting for screencasting videos and Kahoot to add quizzes.
Kahoot, I've heard of, yes, but I have not used.
We use Screencast-O-Matic, which is super simple to learn. Someone suggests VidGrid. Have not heard of that one.
Awesome. I'm writing these down for future reference. So thank you.
Pexels also for free photos.
Pexels. Okay.
Thank you for your comments in the chat. This is wonderful.
Awesome. Okay. Any others before I move on? I think that was my
Slow
next one.
down a little. Yeah, I think you can go ahead and move on. We seem to be slowing down.
All right. So my next chapter is all about measurement, evaluation, and feedback. So we've talked about delivering the training, having those tools, planning it out. Now it's time to determine, did this actually work? What was the effectiveness of the training? So there's two different blocks here. The first is quantitative, so all about the numbers. So this might be a post-training survey you send out to staff members. We in the training field often use the Likert scale, and you may have seen this before as a participant or user. The Likert scale basically says, was this training duration suffice? And the user will either mark strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. So we use that sort of scale when we're giving out post-training results. Next up is completion. So think about this in the era of COVID. Do you need 100% of your staff to complete a training, or do you just need a target audience to complete the training? And it may be mandatory for some people and just recommended for others. Views. So I mentioned that I used Loom, for example, and I can track how many people viewed a training. So if I assign a training to 100 people and only 3 views are popping up, then I need to market the training a little bit better, get some more clout. So that's also kind of a metric I collect as well. So competencies, this might be in the form of a quiz or a knowledge check. So do you have a benchmark of I want 100% of my staff to score 80% above for a specific training? So think about what sort of competencies you want your staff to have and who needs to have it. Collecting before and after statistics. So what this means is, for example, we had a HOLTS training back in November. I collected statistics on any holds issues we had from our collections management department before the training. We then had the training for 2 different sessions for staff. It was also recorded. We waited a little bit and then gathered statistics after the training. So we wanted ideally to see that the numbers of issues decreased, which they did. Next up is qualitative data. So this can be in the form of different comments. You might have a little suggestion box. So if 30 out of 40 staff members use the word, this was helpful, or this helped me understand, the content that's kind of letting you know you're in the right direction. You might put this in a word cloud, so frequently used words will appear bigger than others. Another thing that I personally think is a great success metric is sharing best practices or tools. So I tried to do that in the slides for the technology instruments to ask my audience, which other tools have you used? Would you recommend others one over another? It's also a great way or a platform for your audience members who have a better way to do a process. So it's a great sharing environment. So that's what I see as a success metric is sharing some best practices, specifically because we may not see each other all the time, and a virtual training may be the one opportunity that someone mentions how to do a process better. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a few examples of my training deliverables here at Chesterfield County. The first is a OneNote Notebook. I mentioned that this is a Microsoft application. It's a interactive notebook we had for reopening here. We have a couple of branches that phased into reopening. And we needed everyone to be on the same page about reopening. So I created this training. I did what's called a needs assessment. So I asked different managers what content needs to be highlighted, and then they let me know. I compiled everything together, and my reoccurring themes are on the left-hand side. They include, safety and cleaning, different library services, customer service, facilities. So staff can click on these different topics, and for example, they'll address, what should I do if a customer approaches me without a mask and needs help? Should we move around furniture to socially distance? So this basically covers all the topics, and it's organized really neatly. Like I said, I think this is really great versus having a 200-page document. It's likely staff is, it's easier to digest when it's broken down like this. If you notice on the right-hand side, I am very explicit about what they need to do, how they need to add it to their time card, and how they need to mark it for completion. Next up is PowerPoint. So this is the original, training and instructional platform, but PowerPoint, I believe we're on 2019, has a lot of great tools. If you haven't already looked at them or used them, so you have the ability to record, to stop, to play. If you notice down here, I can highlight different features. There is a microphone listed here if I wanted to do a voiceover and then show a video. So even PowerPoint, they've updated it to meet the times. And I think there's a Zoom feature as well embedded in PowerPoint. I haven't used it just yet. But this is kind of an outline I had for the holds training back in November. Okay, next up is something we do at our new hire orientation. I can do this both virtually or in person. We've had some really smaller classes for newer hire orientation, but most of the time I've done this virtually. It's basically a scavenger hunt to familiarize my staff with the ILS, or integrated library system. So it's having them do different exercises that are related to their job, as well as getting familiar with the building and different library services that we have here at Chesterfield County. So I have them print out the sheet. They go on the scavenger hunt, they find these answers, and then after about 45 minutes or so, they come back, we reconvene, go over these answers, and share some best practices and discuss what they may have gotten stuck on, or if they have any questions, they can let me know. All right, these are two different things I've created for both staff and customers. Again, thinking about what training could be applicable to both. That way it works twofold. The first is Canva. I created a bookmark. They have a specific like bookmark section in Canva for different call number codes. So I've had someone, I think a session before last, who came from a library that used Library of Congress. They may not have been familiar and mentioned they weren't with our cataloging system or the Dewey Decimal System. So I've created kind of little bookmarks and cheat sheets that they can put in their county badge, because we all have a county badge here, to hold on to and then reference if they have a question. So that was created in Canva, quick little bookmark to keep with them. I've also created in Loom a way for people to understand how to search our online catalog. This again is limited to 5 minutes. So it just talks about what our online catalog is and how to complete a basic search. So in the next iteration, I'm looking at creating a video just for advanced searches. So kind of breaking down that content so that it's not like 20 minutes long. It's bite size.
Hi everyone, welcome to the CCPL online catalog demo. In this video, I will provide an overview of the catalog, which is called Encore. I will also demonstrate how to search for items and make sense of these search results.
So that's what it sounds like on there. And then with Loom, I can send this link out easily and people can comment. I can see how many views are on there, and they can like different content.
Hi everyone.
Okay. Next up is the training website. So this is where I house all my training materials. This is for my staff to access through what's called Microsoft SharePoint. It's basically like a website, if you will, and it compiles different documents, but there's also apps within the app. I have organized it, but what I feel is the most important training. So obviously any COVID training is first. My training menu, any county training is listed in here. I also have additional resources outside of our organization. People can look for professional organizations related to libraries. Also lets you create an events calendar. So I can mark, that this conference is going on, ALA conference is coming up in June, so people can see what upcoming events are available to attend. They can also give me feedback in the suggestion box as well. And then I can easily share this with any newcomers or new hires that come along. Let's see if there's anything else. All right. Next up is my evaluation example. So this evaluation is tied to the reopening training, which I showed you in OneNote Notebook. There was a lot of content to cover in that because there were so many different subjects about reopening and questions. So I just made my eval short and sweet. I just asked, was this training helpful for you? Yes or no? And that was required. And then in number 2, I asked them to, use the space below to have any training content suggestions. So were there any best practices, anything you encountered I didn't mention, any grammatical errors? So I was able to go in multiple times a day, see who put in feedback. Well, it's anonymous, but see what sort of feedback was put in there and easily update the content if it was something that I felt needed to be revised. Okay, and then our final chapter will be on reviewing and also additional resources. Okay, So just to review, to plan everything out, considering what sort of challenges you may face, whether that's you may not have a certain amount of supplies, maybe people may not have access to reliable internet, thinking about, is this training a comprehensive course? Can I just make it a simple job aid? Really thinking about what this delivery will look like before actually diving into the training itself. Think about the user design. Again, if you can, make it ADA compliant, have a transcript. If it's a voiceover, make it easy to navigate so that staff do not get stuck or have to jump through hoops. They can easily open the door to training and take what they need to take. Set the stage, so compose clear, concise instructions, maybe find a facilitator if needed to man the chat, and minimize any distractions that you may have if you're presenting live. Evaluate and update. So think about how you'll evaluate the content given sort of challenges you may encounter, and be ready to make constant updates as new information is given to us, particularly in regards to COVID. Also be flexible and adaptable with scheduling. Maybe you're a little bit lenient with deadlines, particularly if new information is coming in, maybe there's a holiday, maybe scheduling and staffing is not 100%. So especially during this time, again, training may not be at the forefront of people's minds, so we do want to work with the learner and user. Okay, so for my next slide, I just want to drive home the point that, virtual learning is not the same as in person, and that's okay. There is a energy that you get when you have your colleagues in a classroom together, you're learning together. There's often free food at trainings. We are reconnecting with staff members that we don't see on a daily basis. As a trainer, I can look into the audience and see, okay, they look confused. Maybe I need to reiterate something, or everyone's nodding their head, so we can proceed to the next content. So we are missing that, but this is the environment we're in now. And as trainers, we are sort of conduits now for online learning, and try to stay positive and connect users to the latest learning opportunities. I've got some additional resources for you all. ADT, I've used a lot this past year. It's the Association of Talent and Development, which is a fancy term for a group of trainers, instructional designers, curriculum developers, and lifelong learners. It's a national organization. However, there are regional chapters. I know there's a Richmond one I've been involved with. There is a paid membership, but I have been exhausting all their free resources or low-cost ones. I did a mentorship program with one of the trainers there. She works in higher education. She actually gave me the template that I used, and I kind of reworked that. They are a really great resource, and like I said, they have lots of different things available that are free or low cost. Some upcoming webinars, just to promote them: 7 secrets for making slides that make sense, and evaluating training impact. And both of those are $5 each to attend. The Library of Virginia Info Center. This is a treasure trove of professional development opportunities, many of which are free. So I know as people are reconsidering their training budgets, what training is out there that is uh, really great and quality for our staff, but also at a low cost. So I would double check with the Library of Virginia. They're always posting different webinars for their calendar on Info Center. Web Junction and Info People. So I use both of these. Just FYI, some of their courses do have a cost, but there's a library of free resources that are available to use. Check out training at ALA, PLA in your state library organization. Note that Some of these places are actually offering several scholarships to attend different conferences, to get involved. And there's some of them specifically for staff that are furloughed, that are experiencing a reduction in hours. So there may be scholarships that are available to staff for professional development. Other trainers. So I don't know if anyone else works in the county like myself, but we have other trainers in social services, police, etc. We meet a few times a year, about 4 times a year, and we just discuss best practices. We share our different training projects we're working on, give each other feedback, and it's likely that other trainers have experienced what you have experienced and try to problem solve through the interesting year that was 2020. So it's also a great way to network and get to know other county coworkers and create sort of outreach in that aspect. Okay, next up is a question answer section, which is our final section for today. So first I want to turn it over to you all and ask, what did you learn today through this training? What did you find most helpful, insightful? Did you learn any new tools or discoveries? And if you could add those in the chat, and I'll give you a couple moments to do that.
MJ, while we're waiting for that, there's been some interest in your templates, your training templates and materials. Are you able to share some of those? Could you send those to us to share with the participants?
Yes, I can. So will they receive the PowerPoint slides after the session?
They will get the recording and the PowerPoint and anything else that you would like to share. Lots of interest in the scavenger hunt, that sort of thing.
Okay, what I can do is create a folder of everything I've created or added in here and then send it to you to distribute to them.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Lots of great comments. Trying to catch up with questions
Yes,
here.
I agree. Lots of great comments. Again, templates are wonderful, and we do what we call rip off and duplicate. So we love to do instead of research and development. That's our joke.
R&D,
We
rip
love to
off and
have things.
duplicate.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Hey, if it's in your toolbox, you know.
yes,
For sure.
yes.
And would you mind reading out any of the comments? I'm trying to see the chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
Enjoyed the free info on the free sessions. I've considered ATD previously and was so glad to hear your experience with this organization. Lots of great information, helpful templates. Appreciate the Loom, Canva, Pexels, etc. Thank you so much. New library mode, new library motto, R&D, a rip off and duplicate. Yeah, it's a great one. And let's see. Remember to keep it bite-sized when recorded trainings. Yes. I think the professional term for that is micro-learning, but yes, absolutely. Short and sweet is good. I have never used the OneNote Notebook. The list of resources that were provided were helpful. Great overview on how to brainstorm, create, deliver, and evaluate a training session.
Awesome. Okay. So my next
So,
slide is
yeah,
actually, oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
My learning objective. So why did I post this after I asked you all what you learned? The idea is that what you said in the chat would hopefully mirror one or more of these bullets. So for example, if you had not used Canva before, it would touch on bullet 3, and you learned a new tool today, hopefully for designing virtual learning. If you hadn't thought about collecting before and after statistics for a training, it would touch on bullet 2. So I'm tying this back into my original learning objective. So hopefully you learned something that tied into this. Okay.
Love the
And
before and after surveys.
And so I asked you all questions. Did you all have any final questions for me? We are at the 50-minute mark, just in time.
Excellent timing. Yes. Further
Yeah, 7 minutes
questions?
left. I don't see any, but I feel like we've kind of addressed things as we go along. So I'll let you.
Question, what do you mean by process and requirements on your template?
Yes. So what will the process of training look like? So is this something that I can do in person? Is it something I can do online? Is it a hybrid? Is it a multi sort of scaffolding training in terms of, you know, is it isolated or are there other components to what the person needs to learn, different chapters? This might be a pre-work, this might be a deployment, and then a post-work.
MJ, another question just dropped in. What is the most important consideration for new hires? We're used to having new librarians shadow other staff as a lot of part of training. That's more difficult in this environment when some are working remotely.
The question is, what is the most important thing to have for a new hire?
Um, what are the most important considerations for new hires in this environment? I know here at the Library of Virginia, someone had asked about, training the front desk staff and how do you do that in a social distancing environment. So
For me, it's being adaptable. We actually, in our library, we call it Library Boot Camp. That's our orientation. We had a pre-recorded video from 2018, and we asked, our Employee of the Year, what's the most important thing to that staff should know? And she said, being adaptable. And fast forward a couple years, and it's still very relevant. So having and teaching them to be adaptable. Processes change. We're going to have new information, 6 months from now that may look differently than what we have done today. Also, knowing what they need to do on their job. So, definitely the ILS integrated library system. I do a training one-on-one with them. That's not something virtually we can do. I can share screenshots, but actually having them go into the system and learn the steps hands-on is, you know, it has to be in person. So our new hire orientation is a little bit of a hybrid as well as virtual in person. So being adaptable, definitely that hands-on if needed.
one more
Um,
question just came in. What do
okay.
you recommend as the best platform for training for staff working remotely?
This depends on what you want to do. So every training is different. For the Holds training, that was something really comprehensive. So that was a whole huge course, pre-work, a recorded video. There's a post survey as well. So that's why I plan out training because it could just be a one document sheet. It doesn't need to be a huge course, so it depends on that subject.